Changing the subject of the formula is similar to solving an equation in that we use exactly the same methods. If this were an equation, I'd be encouraging you to make sure that this 3D were positive rather than negative. So that's the first thing we're going to do. And we're going to do that by adding a 3D to both sides. This now gives me 3D plus A is equal to 4. I want to end up with 3D on its own, which means we need to make sure this A ends up on the other side. So in order to do that, I subtract A because I always do the opposite of what it says to do in the question. So that now gives me 3D is equal to 4 minus A. If this were an equation, you'd now be dividing both sides by 3, and that's exactly what you need to do here. You need to divide both sides by 3. But don't forget you're dividing the 4 by 3 and you're dividing the negative A by 3. So the quick way of showing that is to do this. 3D divided by 3 is just D, and then 4 minus A, and if you write it as a fraction, then you end up with that, and that's how you do that one. You've got to remember that you're dividing all of this by 3. The next one is a little bit tricky, and it's the type of question that causes some of you problems when you're dealing with equations. So again, if we take this in the same way as we take an equation, I'd encourage you to get rid of this 2 first. So what you do there is you multiply everything by 2. Okay, so when I multiply everything by 2, I end up with 2x is equal to y plus 14. Because when I multiply this by 2, it just becomes y because the 2's cancel out each other. I want to get the y on its own, which means I really want to move this 14. So what I do is I subtract 14 from both sides. Okay, so that gives me now 2x minus 14 is equal to y. Whenever we write answers to equations or when we're changing the subject of the formula, the subject, the letter that we're looking for, must always be written first. So all we do here is we rewrite this as y is equal to 2x minus 14. Okay, it's important. Don't forget the subject needs to come first. Leave it like that and you'll have it marked wrong. It must be rewritten with the y. So even though we had a horrible fraction, this actually took fewer stages than the previous example. Okay, and then the final example here. So here you can see that we want to make h the subject of the formula, which means we want to have the 5h firstly on its own, and then we'll eliminate it down to just h. Which means we want to get rid of the 4g. So that means we subtract 4g from both sides. So again, this is exactly the same method as you've been taught for solving equations. That means these cancel out with each other. So I'm now left with 5h is equal to 22 minus 4g. Okay? Now, I'm just left with 5h here, so that means I need to divide that by 5. And again, take care, I need to divide both of these by 5 as well. Okay, so h is equal to 22 minus 4g all over 5. Just remember, the important thing here is that you are using inverse operations, so you're just doing the opposite, so it can go into anything. So that means if you're getting a squared, then you just use the inverse. So if I just show you a very quick example, let's say that you had y squared is equal to 5 and you wanted to make y the subject of the formula. you actually need to square root the y squared in order to get the y on its own. So that just gives you y is equal to the square root of 5. And you don't need to work out the square root of 5. It's just important that you remember to use the inverse or the opposite operations to get you to where you need to. And that's how you change the subject of a formula.